Well, hello there everyone, and welcome to another UXW Bill video. This one features a subject I haven't talked about in a very long time. That's right, it's time for another kitchen table electronics repair. So what do we have today? Well, this is my father's Garrett Grand Master Hunter metal detector. I believe he bought this used sometime in the very late 1980s or early 1990s. At the time, it was pretty much positively state-of-the-art, and he certainly was successful in using this to locate some valuable items. In particular, my grandfather had a terrible insistence upon carrying his gold cross pen and pencil set with him wherever he went, including when he was mowing on a tractor. And of course, it doesn't take too long to figure out that's a good way to lose a gold cross pen or pencil. One of them was never found. But the other one, my father was actually able to locate it with this, and he's had a few other successful finds with this. Neither he nor I nor any of my brothers, mother, family members, anything like that are really avid metal detector users. But there are some people out there in the world that certainly are. And if you're one of them or you're thinking of getting into this hobby, I'd just take a brief sidebar here and say, please follow the rules when it comes to using a metal detector. Be a good citizen and don't ruin it for other people, which basically boils down to making sure that you have a property owner's permission to search for treasure on their property, and that if you should happen to find a treasure of some kind, that you know what you are and are not legally allowed to do with it. So respect the property owner's wishes and definitely don't break the law if you happen to use one of these or are thinking about getting in the hobby. When my father bought this, and I believe he bought it used, it came with several different search coils of varying sizes and capability. Unfortunately, most of those were lost in the basement flood of 1994, and Garrett Electronics no longer makes them, no longer has any support for this unit really, but they do have the manual on their website, which is frankly kind of amazing. And I doubt very much that they would be able or perhaps even willing to provide service literature for this machine, even as old as it is, assuming that they still have any around, because the way that this works is probably viewed as a trade secret and likely has some features, functions, and implementations that they still consider to be valuable trade secrets today. I don't know about all of that. It's getting way off the subject. What we have here is a much simpler problem, at least to start out with. I'm not going to say that this metal detector is still in the greatest of working order. In fact, as it has grown older and my father has used it from time to time, we have noticed increasingly eccentric behavior. Wow, I almost couldn't get that word to pop out. But what we have here is a typical failure for a sophisticated electronic device. This isn't going to be some complex, convoluted, difficult to track down fault, at least not in today's video. So if you're looking for that, you're probably going to be sorely disappointed. And before we even get to this point in the video, I'd like to take a moment and say to the assembled audience who happen to be watching, here in the United States of America, most of us pronounce the word solder with a silent L. That's all I'm going to say about that subject. I don't want to have that discussion down in the video comments area. Thank you. Let's go ahead and get started here. After many years of the battery cartridge being inserted and removed from this particular metal detector, this is a very simple failure that's taken place. This little metal tab that represents one of the terminals simply broke off here at the pop rivet, and now we need to find a way to reattach it. And I am hoping that this will prove receptive to simply being soldered back into place once again. Will it probably be as good as it was when this thing was manufactured? No, I'd imagine not, but hopefully it will get the thing back in the game for a little while yet to come. I'm actually kind of surprised that this one hasn't also shown signs of failure due to age and stress of removing and inserting the battery cartridge over the years. But let's go ahead and get the iron warmed up, get some solder here, and I'll try to bring you along for this repair. I'm not sure how I'm going to set this phone up such that I'll be able to actually capture some decent footage here. You'd think somebody would invent something that would hold one of these in place, but I guess between the last time I mentioned that in a video and now, nobody's actually taken that opportunity and decided to run with it. So I'll just have to stack up a bunch of books and other random things and kind of hope for the best, I guess. Back in a moment, thanks to the magic of video editing. All right, here we are all set up now to make the repair. My theory about repairing this is that hopefully I can lay down a bead of fresh solder on this contact surface right here, create kind of a pad or fillet of some kind, if that's even the proper word to use, to try and give that contact a place to rest. And after I've got that done, I'll take the contact and I'll put it back where it goes. I'll try to heat it up to further secure it in place. Hopefully I won't need any flux to do this. I'm hoping that the board will take fairly kindly to this, but we're about to find out right now. We'll just try warming things up here and see what happens. Well, it looks like it did take fairly well. Okay, so now that we've got that laid down, let's take our little metal piece here. Let's get that in the jaws of our needle nose pliers, because I really don't have a great deal of desire to burn the living bejesus out of my fingers or any other part of my body for that matter. We'll try to put that in place right here, and we'll just heat it up, and we'll see if we can get it to go back into place. I have no idea if this will affect a lasting repair or not. I guess I kind of have my doubts. I mean, I really do feel that my father got his money's worth out of this machine, and he certainly owns a newer model from Garrett that is in good working condition. And I'm not sure that's going to work. It doesn't seem to be going into place. But we'll give everything a moment to cool and solidify. Yeah, I'm not really optimistic here, so let's try that again. Let's heat this up directly. Try putting that into place. Give it a couple moments here to solidify. I hope I don't have to put any flux on this to have a chance of it working, because I don't happen to have any flux handy right now. And it used to be that was something that if I needed it, I could just go to Radio Shack and get it, but lots of luck with that now. Yeah, this doesn't really seem to be working well. Maybe I need to clean up the metal a little bit. You'll notice that it's kind of dark, like maybe it's oxidized or something. So let me try doing that, and I'll be back in just a moment. All right, I've cleaned this up a little bit. I don't know how optimistic I am that it's actually going to work, but we'll certainly go ahead and try to take another bite on it here. I've also turned up the heat on this iron a little bit in the hopes that maybe the heat will conduct through the metal a little bit better than it has. Just give that a moment to solidify and see if it's... I don't know how long that'll last. And now I'm probably really going to tempt fate here and try to just put a little more on the top here, just to give it every chance that it can to stay in place, be as durable as it possibly can be. It tried to get away there, but no matter, we'll put it back into place here, lift it up a little bit. These are not the pliers to be using for that particular job. Give it a couple moments to solidify again and cool off. And then we'll put this thing all the way back together and see if we've got power to it yet again. Make sure we turn that off. I'm going to put the safety cap on it so we don't get any surprises or unexpected tattoos or sudden branding going on there, because I'd really rather not have that happen. But we'll throw this thing back together and see if it'll actually work. Well, the good news is I've got the battery box and the battery cover. Now I just need to find the bottom cover for this thing and the screws. I'm sure that as some of you in the viewing audience are watching this, you're probably screaming at your monitor because sometimes I truly can't see the forest for the trees. Yeah. Yep, definitely, most certainly, and absolutely. They're all there. Now the next problem that I had to figure out involved these nylon threaded posts wanting to back out as I was trying to remove the screws from them. In a perfect world, you'd use something like a needle nose pliers to deal with this, but it happens those are downstairs in the toolbox and I'm far too lazy to get one. There doesn't seem to be one up here, so I settled for a slightly different solution, namely that of taking a bladed screwdriver and jamming it carefully between the post and the casing or the circuit board, again carefully, and then using the conventional Phillips screwdriver to go ahead and back the screw out. Had a little trouble finding the bottom panel here, but that's because I didn't realize that it was attached to the whole sensing head and cabling assembly. Well, that would have been a whole lot easier to do without that whole metal and plastic rod and sensor disc attached. But after almost 40 years, yeah, those push buttons weren't coming loose, and I stopped while I was still ahead and hadn't broken anything. I've got this put all back together now, so let's flip it on its side where hopefully it'll be a little bit more stable. And then, hopefully, in amongst this mess of C-cell batteries, hopefully we've got enough of them that are still good to power this thing up. What a pity it doesn't use a 9-volt battery. I mean, yes, it runs from 9 volts DC, but it would beat the snot out of a 9-volt battery in probably seconds flat. So that's not really an option to go steal one out of the smoke detector, which you should never do anyway. So let's just pop these in here. We'll assume the ones I'm picking are actually good. We'll put this together and we'll see if I still need to fix it some more or if it's been satisfactorily broken. And then I just have to screw the top on, which is kind of a two-hand job, so I'll be back in a moment. Okay. So we put everything back together. Let's see what happens. I tried to do something. I wonder if it thinks it's picking something up. Yeah, I think this thing's probably got other, maybe more serious problems.
We'll lift it up off here. That may have to be down. Push the on button.
Okay, we're going to try it out here. Hopefully in an area that's far away from all things metal, but that's one of the things about metal detecting in any given area. You just never know where there might be some metal. But I'm going to go ahead and stack the deck here. Let's see if it'll find that.
He's not responding like he ought to. The needle's not. The meter needle is not.
Well, maybe we need to go and get some batteries that we know are good.
But other than that,
we don't have anything made of silver or gold that we could throw out here, do we? He's going to get a coin. The pocket knife.
that's all it'll do. I mean, but the needle is, the meter needle is not registering, and it ought to, but the sensor is picking up the pocket knife, clearly. Because that's what it will do.
Well, all right, I said I was going to leave it alone, leave it at that, not dive too much deeper into it at this time, and yeah, that pretty much isn't going to happen because I'm incapable of leaving it alone. So what we have here is a much newer Garrett machine, not nearly as high-end, but I've gone ahead and put a coin out here in the yard. You can see it right there in the middle of your screen, roughly speaking. And if we bring the search coil over here, you can hear this thing just starts going crazy. The coin depth display is a little wonky for some reason, but I'll admit, I've not read the manual for this particular machine. Now let's try the other one and see what it does. Now I am going to go and invest in some fresh batteries for this machine, but if I were to blatantly conjecture as to what's wrong with this thing, I would guess that there may be a problem with this mechanical meter or the circuitry that actually drives it. I really think that everything else in this detector might well be working, because if I go over here to my lovely quarter, I believe that is what it is supposed to do. And if I move it away from the quarter, of course, it quiets down considerably. But yeah, I'm just not getting any response from the meter. And I am not really suspicious of these batteries, although this thing's horn sounded a little bit, or alarm or buzzer or whatever you want to call it, did sound a little bit anemic when I powered it on one of these times. So I guess I'll go spend approximately one national debt on a set of batteries and see if this thing behaves itself any better. And again, while I really did not want to get into this deep, I might actually pop this housing apart and test that meter and see if it's the meter movement or the driving circuitry. Neither one would be really great news at this point. The driving circuitry is likely common components. Much of this thing is simple analog chips of various types, mostly made by Radio Corporation of America. There is a microcontroller in here, an 8-bit Hitachi unit. And really, for the time, that's a pretty impressive amount of computing horsepower this thing's got on board. I will say I am not deeply familiar with how these work or how the microcontroller factors into it, other than to say that this thing has worked very, very well over the years. So let me go find some fresh batteries and we'll see if that does anything for it. Well, folks, I was fully going into buying those batteries expecting to spend somewhere between $15 or $20. And amazingly, I only spent about $6 on these, if you can believe it. At first, I was convinced that the cashier had to have rung them incorrectly. But I just wanted to share that with you because sometimes, fate smiles. I don't really think batteries are going to fix that metal detector, but we're sure going to find out. So, perhaps unsurprisingly, or maybe even surprisingly, depending upon your outlook on things in life, known good batteries did not help this thing to work any better. I think the beeps were coming through the speaker a little more loudly, clearly, and with more frequency stability, but our little meter is still missing in action, and it's here that I think the trouble is likely in the meter element itself, because as you can see, one of these screws has very clearly been wet, and I know that this thing went under in the Great Basement Flood of 1994. I also told myself that I was not going to continue to pursue this any further than I already had. As you can see, I'm definitely not following that guideline, am I? And I actually went ahead and tempted fate, and I got the sensing pole out of there, or rather the pole to which the sensing head is mounted. So let's go ahead and just see what we can see here. And already I think it looks kind of grim. We have this ribbon cable that we'd probably better be very, very careful with. But you can also see that there's evidence of dirt and contamination having gotten into this little meter. I know it's not mechanically stuck because I can actually get it to move. So at this point, it's a toss-up whether or not this is a problem with the driving circuitry or the little meter itself. Now this almost looks like a little permanent magnet DC motor as opposed to a conventional meter movement, but I'm pretty sure that it's not. I think if we were to pull off that little plastic shield, which may or may not be easily possible to do, may also not be possible to do that without chancing disaster, that we would probably see a conventional meter movement inside there. So at this point, there's a couple ways a person could go about testing this depending on how involved they wanted to get with things. I could try desoldering these, but I'm not sure that's really a great idea. Again, I don't know that I wouldn't damage that flexible connecting cable. I'm surprised they chose to do that instead of using some simple wires. That would have been a lot less fragile, but I suppose it would have cost more, and that's probably why it couldn't be done that way. So I think what I'll do instead is we'll go ahead and we'll get a multimeter over here. Hello. And we'll get some clip leads over here, and we'll just see if there's any kind of a signal being applied to these two wires. Should probably be some kind of DC voltage, just a couple of volts, if even that much, if everything that drives this meter is actually working, and then we'll know for sure. Now, other ways you could test this, if I wanted to disconnect one of these, I could do a resistance test across this meter and see if it's electrically intact. I could also, with one of these terminals disconnected so as to avoid any potential backfeed of electrical energy that could damage the metal detector's circuitry, I could go ahead and inject a small DC voltage into this meter and just see if it happened to move. But I think the least invasive, easiest, and most straightforward thing to do is just to try to capture the meter signal if there is one being sent, and then we will know for certain what is or isn't going on with this thing. So I'll go ahead and I'll put the batteries back in it, and we'll just see what happens. Now, the polarity of the signal being sent to this meter is a matter of some question right now because it's obviously not labeled, but I am going to make the assumption that this larger trace that bifurcates here in this ribbon cable might be a ground, and if so, it goes up here to this terminal, and I'm thinking this might be the actual signal. We'll see what happens here in a moment. Doesn't really matter a whole lot because this meter will read in either polarity, and if we get it backwards, it doesn't matter. We just want to know that some kind of something or another happens to be going on here. So we'll turn it on. We'll probably get a beep from the speaker, and we'll just see if anything shows up on the meter display here. Okay, we're getting about 5 volts, it looks like, and then it dropped down to nothing. So I think that pretty much confirms that our trouble is most likely in the meter. Now, I do have a little bit of ability to control the signal that this thing is sending, because if I press the power button again, that'll request a battery check, and with good batteries in this thing, as is the case right now, we should get a voltage sufficient to fully deflect the meter, or very close to. Maybe. Maybe we're not going to get that. There we go. Just took a little diddling around. Maybe I'm not making very good contact or something. But it definitely appears to be running the battery check now. I guess we should make sure that the little meter itself is not deflecting. And indeed it's not. So I think we now know for sure that the little meter is what's failed. And unfortunately, that is the worst of the two problems to have, because although we could probably find a meter that's electrically compatible, we'd probably never find one that would fit in here the way the Garrett original did. So apparently I just won't learn my lesson and make myself leave this thing alone. I actually disconnected one of those leads. I've got the meter in its resistance testing mode here. I'll just hook up our little clip lead here to the other side, and unfortunately it's not good news. But now, of course, in the continued spirit of not being able to leave anything alone, I'm definitely wondering if I dared to go in here and chance disaster, I wonder if I could find the break in the circuit and maybe get that meter to work again. I don't know, and I swear to you I am not going to pursue it deep into the windings of that meter movement, but maybe we'll get lucky. Maybe it'll be right at the beginning. I don't know. Sure gonna find out, though. So I backed out these 2 screws, thinking that would be sufficient to let me remove this plastic casing from around the meter movement, and that actually did not do what I expected. Now the meter is free from the face of the metal detector, and there's a set of screws on this other side. So I'll see if taking those out will get me in there. Well, folks, this is where the good news portion of our broadcast, as well as the broadcast in general, pretty much comes to a close. I tempted fate by diving unwisely deeply into this little meter movement, and in the process of doing so, I crossed the point of no return. Not that it probably wasn't already fatally broken, mortally wounded, however you prefer to say it, but it certainly is now, even if it wasn't then. These things are fiddly, fragile, and stuff like that, unfortunately, is just not really my forte. I'm not too surprised. I fully expected this might well be the outcome. And so for right now, that's where the story ends. Probably where the story ends forever, I guess. Because one could probably find some sort of a 5-volt DC meter, an analog swinging needle meter such as this. Maybe even something that could be kind of hacked, bodged into place. I don't know. But I'm not really sure it's worth that. And I seriously doubt, given that Garrett has told my father in the past that they have not had other parts available for this metal detector any longer, that they would be very likely to have this meter movement. There's no name on this thing. Even if there was, there's no guarantee that the people who manufactured it are even still in business. I'd be a little surprised if Garrett themselves manufactured this meter, but they may well have. I'm honestly not sure if the camera light is a help or a hindrance. I'm leaning slightly toward the latter. But let's take a closer look at this little mechanism, and I'll show you where I believe the failure is. We'll start by trying to tease the meter needle and electrical coil out of the way here. If we look at the back of this, it's quite evident that there's been some major corrosion going on, and I believe that represents the point of the failure. We'll set that aside and we'll take a look at the body of the meter movement here. If we look very carefully at it, you can see that there is a tiny spring-style coil. There was another one of these on the front side, and I believe the two of those represented the pathway for electricity to flow into that meter coil and move the meter needle by opposing this permanent magnet that's located here in the body of what was once the meter assembly. Unfortunately, I broke the wire up front, and this one back here appears that it was already broken. And again, I don't think the camera is really going to be able to pick this up. I can see it with my eyes. Maybe if I can tease it out of there with the meter lead, I can show it to you as well. But it sure looks to me like the tail end of that wire is badly corroded. You might be able to see it there. And I think it simply broke off. Maybe it wasn't even a product of corrosion at all. Maybe after so many cycles across that meter scale, the repeated mechanical strain simply conspired to break that electrical connection. Well, in any event, folks, that is truly the end of the story. I promise, well and truly, I will not continue this video on any further. I don't know why that's not focusing. But it doesn't really matter. Thank you for watching. I hope this video was informational or at least interesting to a few of you in the viewing audience. And as always, I am certainly interested in hearing your constructive commentary.